back, everybody.
Welcome back.
So, the other day we talked about corporal punishment, spanking, whatever. That episode came out today.
So the one I have not yet posted. Okay.
Oh, you're behind
I
now.
am. I just got behind in scheduling. Like, I've been putting them out the same day, but like a couple hours late. Like in this one, I almost hit the go button before I start recording. And then I was like, oh, I'll just post it tomorrow, so it's at a more normal time for people.
Gotcha. So yeah, I guess so. The one that this is odd that I have an episode out before you. That's not normal.
Stealing all the views.
Yeah. Anyways, someone in the I don't know if he wants to be named, so I'm not going to name who. But someone in my Discord just wanted to discuss it today. After the episode came out, and his opinion is that spanking a child is sexual assault. Discuss.
That's asinine.
So
I mean, that's almost like saying so. Think of those countries where, remember, it was a big deal a long time ago. We were kids, but when that guy was gonna get caned, and
oh yeah, God, that was a long time ago.
God, I don't remember what country that was in either. But he had done something stupid, but their punishment was based on corporal punishment, and they wanted to sentence him to like 12 canings or whatever. And like the U.S. was trying to step in and be like, "That's not our ways." And I think he ended up taking it. He just was like, you know what, whatever. Like I mean,
they didn't kill him or anything
no,
like that.
they didn't kill
right?
him. It was just some like, I think if I remember, they caned him and he passed out after like the 8th one because they cane apparently like hardcore. But he took his beating and he went home. Like that was it. And for one, we should talk about that in a minute. But back to your thing. That's like, so caning, is that also sexual harassment?
Like, I don't want to misrepresent.
Sexual harassment, excuse me. Wait.
Assault.
Sexual assault.
Sexual
yeah,
assault.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, I don't want to misrepresent what he said. So let me go back up to Discord and actually kind of read his argument. Because pretty much we all disagreed with him in the Discord. I mean, we were all anti-spanking, but we were all also not in agreement.
Spanking constituted sexual assault.
Right. All right, hold on. Just want to make sure I read exactly what he said. Okay, he said if an adult were to touch or slap the butt of another adult, it would clearly be considered sexual battery or assault. And he linked, an article where someone in Georgia recently, a news anchor sued because a man slapped her butt, and he was convicted
in a sexual manner.
Well, see, that was my point. Was that the intent was sexual, and I even looked up the definition of sexual, and is like relating to the instinct, psychological processes, and activities connected with physical attraction or intimate physical contact between individuals. So I brought point out this is intimate physical contact. And his point was that, so he said, hold on. He says, is the butt not an intimate region of the body? And I was like, well, not for a child, it's not. And we basically went back and forth about one of his arguments was, well, when did I start masturbating? So he's like, so you were sexual whenever you were 11 years old, right? And I'm like, with myself, but I wasn't sexual with adults. So yeah, basically we just went back and forth, and his point was that the butt is an intimate region of the body. And some of our arguments were silly. Like Emily was saying stuff like, what about whenever I go to a gynecologist or something like that? Like what is, or I mean that might not have been hard, but someone brought up gynecologist.
Is that rape because they actually penetrate?
He said that it's still sexual, but there's consent. He says that that you're still touching a sexual part of the body.
So young ladies have to also get seen by gynecologists and get vaginal exams and things like that. So is that all of a sudden statutory rape?
Well, I mean, he didn't say it was rape because there's consent.
But is it statutory rape when you're underage?
Well, still not. It's no form of rape because there was consent.
It doesn't matter if there's consent or not when you're underage. That's considered statutory rape.
Huh. I guess. I don't know. I don't know what he would say to that.
But the other arguments I would make to that is I would counter you in one aspect and say, just because it's with a child, that it doesn't mean it can't be sexual. That there's definitely sexual assault that happens between grown people and
Oh,
children.
absolutely. I'm not saying
And
there's not. I just
could constitute spanking as part of that, but not a punishment spanking. It's a sexual spanking. So I do think you can differentiate that there is a sexual version of spanking that is 10 times more wrong than, you know, a spanking for punishment. Like, people who spank, I disagree with them, but I would not put them in the I want to kill you momentarily like category necessarily. But if you spank a child for sexual pleasure, then I want you to die. You know?
Right. And so when I was Googling this after we had the conversation, that actually was one of the things that come up. There was a pastor that had been accused of sexually molesting boys, and he denied all the accusations of sexual assault. But then they brought up, well, you've been spanking these boys, and you make them take off their underwear and everything when you spank them. And he's like, yeah, I do that. And so
His defense being, I do that as a punishment, not
yes,
a sexual thing.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of shitty, because if at face value he's correct, I'm not saying, again, I agree with it, but that might be within legal boundaries. But if it crosses a line of that is kind of weird too. It's like sexual pleasure almost crosses a complete line of child spanking.
Right.
Like, if you spank them punitively, it's fine, but if you get any like sexual pleasure out of it, now you're a pedophile rapist. It's just a weird line that is existing in the law.
Right. Yeah. So basically, I just wanted to see what you thought.
Well, the other thing I was going to say, so does that mean a football coach is sexually assaulting all of the football players when they like slap?
That got brought up too. Yeah, he said that's still sexual. That's a sexual touch.
I mean, so that one is the interesting thing about that one is I would say that if a player was opposed to that because they felt sexually violated when that happens, I think they're within that right to not have that happen, to not be spanked in the butt.
Yeah. I mean, but you know what? I'm sure if a player brought that up and said that,
it'd probably be a really hard sell, because it's just the way it's always been, which is always what gets people into a lot of trouble. Just because it used to be acceptable in society doesn't mean it was ever right, nor does it make it right to use that as your excuse.
Yeah,
exactly. Now, so that would be a hard one, and I guess that puts you in a really gray area for those people who do feel like this guy. If this guy was a professional football player, is he living in fear now every time he plays the game, and because he feels violated every time he goes out there, but he does it because it's his career and it's what he wants to do. He puts up with it. You know, that's kind of a scary thing to think about. I was going to ask, about the caning guy that we were talking about. That punishment was he did something wrong, he got caned, and his punishment is over, right? How do you think those countries are with, a one-time physical type of punishment? Like, you didn't go to jail for 5 years of your life, but you got fucking beat the shit out of one day. Do you think that's better or worse?
I wonder how many countries still do like the whole eye for an eye sort of thing. The hand, like if you still would chop off your hand, that sort of thing.
Oh, I don't know.
Looking up this caning guy. Or trying to. It's been so long, I don't know. It was Singapore. I almost said Singapore a minute ago, but I wasn't 100% sure. And he was a U.S. student. I guess that's why there was the drama. He was a U.S. student in Singapore.
Well, and so it's weird. I believe that if you're a student somewhere else and you break their laws, you need to deal with their punishments. But at the same time, I do put a caveat and to an extent on there, because that student in North Korea who was a dumbass who went and desecrated that painting or whatever, and got sentenced to all those years of hard labor in North Korea, and then all of a sudden got delivered back because that government decided to have a change of heart, and they basically brought him back dead.
Right.
That's kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
Or if I'm a student somewhere and let's say I mistakenly did something that was against the law, and I'm a firm believer that ignorance is not an excuse per se, but if I did something that in America is so accepted and normal, and that all of a sudden committed me to life in prison in some other country, then I have to go, maybe I don't necessarily agree with this,
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Like if one country, right? So it was 4 strokes.
Oh, 4.
He was 19. He was 19 years old. When he talks about it today, he says it was like a bloody nose. But at the time, he said that the prison official said that at the first strike, he yelled, "I'm dying," but he has no memory of that. He did say there was a prison officer stood beside him and guided him through the ordeal, saying, "Okay, Michael, 3 left. Okay, Michael, 2 left. Okay, 1 more. You're almost done." It was from vandalism. He had confessed to vandalism.
That vandal. And then
He was spray
afterwards,
painting cars, is what he was doing.
well, then don't fucking do that shit in the middle of Singapore.
Yeah.
And Fort Caning sounds pretty, excuse me, pretty brutal and all, but you know, it was weird how much press that got.
Right. The skin did rip open. There was some blood. I mean, let's not exaggerate, and let's not say a few drops or that the blood was gushing out. It was between the two. It was like a bloody nose. It was hard to sit for a few days. He was able to walk immediately after. And he was able to do push-ups. Like, that matters.
Yep. I mean, that's the first thing I always do after I get sexually assaulted. I mean, spanked. I do some push-ups. Show myself I'm a real man.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole article. So it sounds like he was okay. Huh. Yeah, like, I mean, that's the kind of thing we really don't even know about until it became an issue because it was an American that was getting caned.
Right, right. But that's like, you know, normal process in some places.
Right. But yeah, I bet there still are countries that do the whole, like, we'll take your hand.
How does Singapore still do caning?
I don't know. See, there's a Wikipedia article, and I didn't actually read it there. Caning's a widely used form of corporal punishment in Singapore. It can be divided into several contexts: judicial, prison, reformatory, military, school, and domestic. These practices of caning are...
Prison caning versus school caning? What?
I guess so. Like, I guess if you're at school and you do something wrong, like, instead of, like, you know, we have corporal punishment, like a paddle at school, I guess they get a cane. If that makes sense. I guess. This is just a guess.
Oh, yeah, I guess it makes sense. Just... it's weird that they're categorized.
Right. And maybe there's some difference between them. Let's see here. Largely a legacy of influence by British colonial rule in Singapore. Some forms of corporal punishment are also used in some former British colonies, including two of Singapore's neighboring countries, Malaysia and Brunei. Of these, judicial cane is the most severe. It is reserved for male convicts under the age of 50 for a wide range of offenses under the Criminal Procedure Code. Also used a discipline measure in prisons. Caning is also a legal form of punishment for delinquent servicemen in the Singapore Armed Forces. It is conducted in the SAF detention barracks. Caning is also used as an official punishment in reform schools. In a milder form, caning is used to punish male students in primary and secondary school for serious misbehavior. The government encourages this, but does not allow caning for female students, who instead receive alternate forms of punishment such as detention or suspension. A smaller cane or other implement is also used by some parents to punish their children. This is allowed in Singapore, but not encouraged by the government. The Singapore government has mentioned that it considers the judicious application of corporal punishment is in the best interest of the child. And then it breaks it down. There's like a bunch of different separate articles, like judicial caning, prison caning, military caning, reformatory caning, school caning, parental caning, and so on. But yeah, it looks like it's still used.
I wonder. I just wonder what their crime rate is in comparison.
Yeah. Huh. Men sentenced to death are exempt from caning.
Wait. I don't get it. Because isn't caning like in lieu of other types of sentencing? Or isn't that their sentence?
I mean, I guess like someone that's on death row, so to speak, can't be caned.
So they can just go... Basically, is it trying to tell you that you can do whatever you want? You're gonna die. So
I don't know. That's kind of weird, right? I wonder how quickly their death row thing works. Because like in America, you don't death row for so fucking long, which I don't understand either. Why is that? Why is it we put someone on death row and then we're like, all right, sit
well,
here in prison for the
it's
next 40
because
years?
of the what do they call it? Not retrial, the appeals process. It's all about the appeals process, and you have to exhaust all your appeals and all that stuff before you can get. Because wasn't it what was one of those the bomber, Oklahoma City bomber guy? What was his name? Was it him or was it the other Woods bomber dude?
I don't
But
remember.
one of the bombers. The second he got like one of his appeals went through and they upheld the conviction, he came out and said, "I'm done appealing. I am not going to appeal anymore." And within a week, they did the death sentence.
Really?
Because he had renounced his appeals and said, "I'm not doing it anymore." Because I guess he could have stayed on death row for like another 20 years going through the appeals process and all this stuff. Which in some cases might be good because they just had that one guy, Curtis Flowers. I don't know if you ever heard of this case. I listened to it in a true crime podcast a couple years ago. It's been this case of this guy that has been on death row 6 times. And he keeps having the Supreme Court overturn his sentence and gets released from prison for these like jury tampering and like all these different crazy things. And this very seemingly innocent man, but this prosecutor is so determined to keep him in prison, keeps refiling the charges and ends up stacking the jury again. He's been sentenced.
I thought that you couldn't do that. I thought like there's a thing.
He's getting his convictions overturned. He's not, or getting thrown out. He's not getting proven not guilty. So if they come through and say, if he ever goes through a trial that says you're not guilty, you can't convict somebody for double jeopardy. But when they're throwing out your conviction, it's like you're starting fresh.
I didn't know that worked that way. I thought once you went to jail, and you got out.
Do you know the whole Serial podcast stuff with Adnan Syed up in Baltimore? No. That came out, and they were trying to basically, cast doubt on whether he, killed his girlfriend or whatever. And he's going through the appeals process, and the appeals process, he won his appeal, and basically his conviction was vacated. So theoretically, he is not a convict anymore. But he was still in jail because he still needs to be put on trial for the murder because he's now not proven innocent or guilty. He is just could be on trial again if the state presses charges. The problem with his is then it went up to a different level. Like then the prosecution questioned. They fought the vacating of the sentence, and it actually ended up getting reinstated. But for the brief time, he had no status again after like 20 years.
Huh.
But this Curtis Flowers guy, 6 times. He actually just got his last death row sentence. He just got it vacated like 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or something like that. Dude's been in the system for like 30 or 40 years.
That's crazy.
On death row 6 different times. Like, it's fucking insane. So it's in his case, it's potentially good because it seems that he's innocent. But I guess even this prosecutor, like the true crime one on it, what was it called? I think it's called Actually Innocent or something like that was the podcast. I can't remember what it was called. But it's this prosecutor basically has been brought up on charges himself for the things that he's doing, which clearly are just trying to get a conviction with not caring about the law. And is basically just getting slaps on the wrist. This
guy just hates this guy then.
Yeah, he hates this guy and always just wants to win. And that's where they say that there's big problems with like prosecution in general, like making a murderer with Stephen Avery and all. A lot of people, like whether you believe that he's innocent or guilty or not, it doesn't really matter. There's enough doubt in that case that you would think that the state wants to go back and make sure it's right, but they just are fighting tooth and nail to not let a retrial happen. It's just like, nope, he's guilty. That's all there is to it. And it's like, wouldn't you want to make sure it was done properly as opposed to thinking an innocent man's in jail? You might think you have the right person, but if there's this much shadow of a doubt, then let another trial happen. I don't understand like why Yeah, and if the second trial goes through and you declare him not guilty or whatnot, then you might need to look in the mirror and say, if one trial says you're guilty and one trial says you're not guilty, is that really reasonable doubt? Beyond reasonable doubt?
Right.
Yeah.
It's weird how, like, I don't know, how these things happen where there's like it's clear that there's something going on here, and like, but no one's willing to like bite the bullet and admit they're wrong.
Yeah. Is it an admission of being wrong, or do they think it like, I'm a prosecutor, therefore I prosecute? Like, that's my winning. Is prosecuting.
I am a prosecutor.
Yeah. I will not have won if you're not in jail. Like, it doesn't matter if you're innocent or not. That's the game. I get you there whether you're guilty or not. It shows how good I am if I can make an innocent man be guilty.
God, do you think they really think that?
I don't know. I bet you some of them do. Almost guarantee some of them do. I mean, yeah. So that's awful. But then what's worse? Is it worse or better when somebody defends somebody that they know is guilty?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if you're a lawyer, like, you kind of signed up for that. Like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to defend some fucking guilty people, I guess, and that's just what I do.
But isn't that fucked up?
I mean, they're not supposed to know that the person's guilty.
Sure.
It is fucked up. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not fucked up. But I guess I don't feel as strongly negatively against that as I do someone that's trying to put innocent people away.
So you're okay with a guilty person going free over an innocent person being jailed or death sentenced wrongfully?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's a respectable position to hold. I mean,
it'd be nice if it was like this fucking like Minority Report system where fucking, you knew everything. Hell, you knew everything before it happened even. But I mean, it'd be nice if we had like some way to know for sure that all crime was, correctly done, and that we know we were not executing. I mean, I'm not a real big fan of killing people either way. Like,
you're not a death sentence person. Well, I mean,
no, I'm not strongly against it either.
And let's just say life in prison then. I mean,
yeah, I mean, that seems bad. If I had a life sentence, I think I'd rather than just put me down.
Fucking death sentence.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I guess anybody can make anything a home. So, and a lot of inmates do. Like, the people who are there for long term that have trouble when they get to the outside because they're, used to, been spent 30 years in prison. That's the life that I know.
Right.
Anybody can make it a home. Everything you see on TV about prisons, and I've watched some like true prison documentaries and things like that. It looks fucking horrible. I'd be worried about it all the time, but I guess you get used to it.
Right. Yeah, it just looks miserable. I mean, even like some of them, don't seem so bad in terms of like, what you're experiencing, the people you're with, all that sort of stuff. But like, just not going outside, like being constantly like, I mean, and I guess it probably differs from prison to prison. Like, some prisons, like the guys in charge or whatever might be decent human beings and aren't total fucking assholes. And then there's some where they're like, it's like you're constantly under some kind of fucking asshole cop surveillance sort of thing where the guy's just got like an ego and treats you like shit because he can. So like, I bet there's all kinds of differing like quality of life in like per prison. You know what I mean?
And I wonder what happened to the concept of rehab. Like, it seems that maybe there's prisons that are really good at truly trying to rehab people, but we just don't hear about them as much as you do the ones that are really, really, really shitty places to be.
Right. Because you're right. I mean, there's no money in rehab, right? I feel like prison is very much
there is, but in a very indirect way, and that's the problem. Nobody sees the money directly, but all you do is you have prisons that don't have to have people coming back to them, so you save money by having less people in prison because you rehab this guy to be a model citizen now.
Right.
But yeah, who gets the profit from that? Not the prison. Many of them turning for-profit prisons.
I mean, that's what prisons are, right? They're for profit.
Not all of them. Absolutely not all of them. I think for-profit prisons are a relatively new-ish thing, or a newish thing that is becoming the norm as opposed to the few and far between places. I mean, you watched Orange is the New Black. In the
Yeah.
middle, in the middle of what I've seen so far, I mean, I'm sure there's more seasons that I haven't watched yet, but in the middle of what I've seen is that becomes a for-profit prison.
Right. I guess I thought even the like government run prisons are still like they're not. It's not like a nonprofit organization.
Well, I think it's not a not-profit organization, but it's based on taxpayer funds. So in a way, so thinking about the concept of being for-profit or not-for-profit is kind of weird, because the whole concept of not-for-profit just means all the money goes back into the organization.
Right.
In some way, shape, or form. You could say all the money from a prison goes right back into the prison to call it a non-profit, but doesn't mean you're not paying the warden, $6 million salary every year or something like that, because that could still be part of the nonprofit status. So just going on a for-profit route is almost just being more honest, but what you're doing is you're trying to, I guess, maximize your money because you don't have money to spend. So in a way, you're still basing it on the for-profit model, as we need to find a way to get the maximum amount of money in. Because that's still what we have to run the business with.
Right. Well, we we went on a tangent there.
A little bit. I mean, spanking equals prison.
Yep. Yep.
Sexual assault in prison.
That'll be the end of this episode, I guess. So, do you spank in prison? Let us know.
Some people might. Yeah. Do you watch YouTube in prison? Then do you spank in prison?
Do you think spanking is sexual assault? Talk to us. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.